Hello, and welcome to this webinar to present the latest major release of EUCLID 6 with format changes. This is EUCLID 6 version 9. I am Robin Allen. I work at the European Chemicals Agency in the EUCLID team. I will be introducing this webinar today and then wrapping up at the end. I will start by showing the release plan for the EUCLID 6 software. EUCLID follows an annual release cycle, which includes one major release with format changes at around the end of May, and at least one service release towards the end of October. Between those releases, there can be optional service releases. The service releases contain no changes in data format and are reserved for changes to functionality and configuration, such as for the validation assistant and report generation. As you can see from the orange flag on the left, we have just passed the major release of EUCLID version 9, which includes changes to the data format. We always recommend using the latest version of EUCLID, but as with any software that is important for your business, it is important to consider carefully whether and when to update. Here we have some considerations for EUCLID. Firstly, verify which version of EUCLID is accepted by the recipients of your data. Consider also the needs of those with whom you work and share data. These factors are especially important where a change in format occurs, as is the case for this release. Check the release notes and the FAQs on the EUCLID website, for which links are provided on this slide. These may include news of improvements you are eager to have, but also there may be known issues that could affect your work. Finally, before upgrading, verify the compatibility of tools that are integrated with EUCLID, such as Keza, the data extractor, text analytics, and the data uploader. The release schedules and compatibility of these tools are provided on the websites of EUCLID and Keza. Now let's take a look at the agenda for what will be presented in the rest of today's webinar. After my introduction comes an overview of the main format changes presented by Leia Cocco. After that, François Le Goff will continue with format changes, but those that are for specific stakeholders. Next, we have Panos Zarigiannis, who presents changes relevant to the Drinking Water Directive. The next section is on Biocidal Products Regulation, and that's presented by Dorota Bershar-Sosnowska. Finally, I will come back to cover other changes in the software and to conclude the webinar. I now hand over to Leia Cocco.
Thank you, Robin, and hello. My name is Leia Cocco from the EUCLID team at ECHA, and I will give you an overview of the main format changes included in version 9 of EUCLID 6. First off, I could start with a few words about how the EUCLID format is structured. And on this image here, you can see that the EUCLID format can be divided into two parts. On the left side, we have the part of the EUCLID format that is harmonized at the OECD level. And these are documents that can be used to prepare submissions across different jurisdictions in the OECD. And changes to these documents need to be agreed at the level of the OECD. Then, in addition to the harmonized format, we also have format extensions used to fulfill requirements from specific regulatory authorities. So, for example, EUCLID is customized to prepare submissions for the EU legislation, such as REACH, the Biocidal Products Regulation, or the Plant Protection Products Regulation. But it can also be used to prepare submissions for Australia and New Zealand. The competent authorities of the United Kingdom are also preparing their own extension for potential future UK REACH purposes. So let's have a closer look at the requirements behind the format changes for this major release. We collect requirements all year long from the different users and stakeholders, and we also check changes done to the relevant regulations as well as the update of the test guidelines by the OECD. And you can see on the right side of this image that this year more than half of the requirements were targeting the harmonized part of the Euclid format, so the OECD, core, and also domain definition providers. There is also a good proportion of changes that are done at the level of the EU plant protection product specific format, the Biocidal product specific format, and there has been a lot of work on the preparations for the Drinking Water Directive usage of Euclid. So apart from the standard maintenance of the format that is done following the feedback collected from Euclid users, there are also some other main drivers for this year's format updates as listed here. For the harmonized parts of the format, we have included changes from the latest OECD consultations regarding, for example, new OECD test guidelines, as well as documents in the use and exposure series. There was an OECD project running on the role of robust study summaries and an interagency project on the extended one-generation reproductive toxicity studies that have served as a source of format changes. Dedicated working parties and expert groups have provided input on specific harmonized formats and their updates. And there was also an ECHA project regarding a report template for harmonized classification and labeling, whereby some format change needs were identified. And I will discuss the main changes made to the harmonized format shortly, and later on, changes to the specific parts of the Euclid format will be discussed in more detail. But as an overview, the main sources for these are the implementation of the EU Drinking Water Directive, the EU Food Contact Materials legislation, the EU REACH reporting requirements under the microplastics restriction, the new working context for safeners and synergists applications, as well as overall maintenance of the EU plant protection products format. And on the right, you can see the origin of the prioritized format change requirements, which are mainly coming from ECHA and EFSA, but also from other stakeholders. And here I would like to point you to the direction of the Euclid website, where all the changes made to the Euclid format are published. Here you can also find the complete format documentation package, which is always composed of the same elements. So, for example, you can find all the XML schema definition files, the user-readable Euclid document representations. There's a list of all the Euclid fields in Excel format, comparison files to the previous version of the format, and, for example, the migration rules that were implemented in Euclid to move from version 8 of the format to version 9. But then on to the more detail level. So first up, changes coming from the OECD Secretariat. So the OECD test guidelines are constantly evolving, and as a result, the OECD Secretariat has proposed revisions to specific OECD harmonized templates, which are implemented as part of this major release. So the OHD 77 immunotoxicity has been modified to include a new test guideline on in vitro immunotoxicity, And this now means the introduction of specific sections for reporting in vitro methods and results in the OHT. We have also implemented a number of dynamic content rules in EUCLID, meaning that once the user has selected either an in vivo or in vitro endpoint, the fields that are not relevant for that particular endpoint will be made inactive in the user interface. Then the OHTs 101, nanomaterial agglomeration aggregation, 103, nanomaterial crystallite grain size, and 104, nanomaterial shape and aspect ratio have been updated to include the new test guideline 125 on nanomaterial particle size and size distribution. And here a number of additions have been made to these formats to accommodate reporting of studies according to the new test guideline. And this includes, for example, new fields, new pick list values, new text templates, help text changes, and some changes to field labels. And additionally, the name and ID of the OHT 103 and its respective endpoint summary has also changed from nanomaterial crystallite grain size to nanomaterial size distribution. Then, as part of a dedicated OECD project, the confidence in the robust study summaries approach for hazard assessment was evaluated and potential improvements identified. As a result, changes have been made to a number of OHTs. So firstly, to improve the reporting of validity criteria and validity results, a repeatable validity criteria table was included in the 30 OHTs that also previously requested some information on validity criteria. Then the help text in the field. Any other information on results, including tables, in all endpoint study records was slightly amended to refer to the relevant result tables, and additionally, some further help text amendments were made to specific OHTs. Next, based on the findings of an ECHA-led interagency review project on extended one-generation reproductive toxicity studies, as well as an expert consultation that followed, several changes were made to the OHT 73 toxicity to reproduction. And these included data type changes, mainly moving from text fields to text template fields, to further guide the applicants in the expected contents, amendments to existing text templates and help texts, some additions to the pick list values in the field strain, and then the addition of a field for converted dose / concentration. And this is because, especially in the context of dietary studies, information on the converted dose is essential for assessment, but is not received through the current format. And because this information on the converted dose is needed for assessment of also other toxicological studies, the same field has been added to 8 further toxicological OHTs. Then there is a set of amendments to help texts made, not only to the OHT 73, but also to 9 other toxicological OHTs. These are to the results of examinations types of fields, where the idea is that these types of pick list fields would not be left empty, but instead populated with a suitable option as described in the amended help text, and where relevant, also provided with a justification on the selection. And this is because missing investigations without justification raise concerns on reliability. Next, on to the toxicokinetics formats, where ECHA and EFSA prepared a joint proposal as part of a working group. Changes were made to the OHD 58 basic toxicokinetics and its respective endpoint summary, toxicokinetics, metabolism, and distribution, to be able to provide the key results for absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion studies in a structured manner as numerical values, both in the endpoint study record and the endpoint summary. Additions were also made to be able to report comparative in vitro metabolism studies on the formats. And lastly, changes were made to align with the information requested by the DIR composer used by EU PPP applicants. So to facilitate the integration between EUCLID and the MetaPath tool that is used to analyze metabolism data. For the most part, these changes consist of additions, but there are also some changes to the data types of existing fields, which required some special attention to the migration logic applied. And as a result of the work, the endpoint summary was also made into an OECD harmonized template. The harmonized summary covers both the OHDs 58 and 59, so basic toxicokinetics and dermal absorption, as was also previously the case. The existing EU PPP endpoint summary dermal absorption was also kept under EU PPP, and it's to be used for products applications as it's quite specific to products. Then on to ecotoxicological formats, where it was proposed by EFSA to improve the reporting and structuring of dose response data. The proposed changes are especially relevant in the context of the new risk assessment guidance on bees that EFSA and ECHA prepared in sync, as well as the resulting bee calculator tool developed by EFSA that can be used for the risk assessment of bees. So to facilitate the extraction of information to the bee calculator, but also in a more general context to facilitate the recalculation of the results by the assessing authority when needed, to facilitate result reporting by the applicant in a more structured and harmonized manner, and also the reporting of the information by the EUCLID report generator. A new repeatable dose response table was added to the results section of ecotoxicological OHDs. And this addition applies to all ecotoxicological OHDs apart from OHDs 52 and 55 through 57, where the addition is not relevant. This new table is placed after the result block effect concentrations under the header detailed results, where uploading of these detailed results is possible using the CSV template. In relevant fields, the new table reuses the same pick list values that also occur in the effect concentrations result block. Documents in the pesticide residue chemistry series have also been revised by a dedicated working party led by EFSA. For OHDs 85.2 and 85.3 on the metabolism of residues, changes were made to align the contents with the information requested by the MSS composers for crops and livestock, so to facilitate the integration between EUCLID and MetaPath. The structure of OHDs 85.5 and 85.9 were also revised to be better suited for the purpose, And similarly, their matching endpoint summaries were revised and, as a result, promoted to OECD harmonized templates. All in all, there were several changes made to the OHT 85 series formats. And for the most impactful data type changes, it was agreed to use attachments for forward migrations to store any such information that would otherwise be lost during migration. Noting, however, that these documents are currently only used in the EU PPP working contexts, and for the most part, not a lot of legacy data is expected, as most of the data has so far been requested to be provided using an XML attachment instead of actually filling in the fields of the OHTs. Changes to several OHTs have also been made on account of the EU test methods regulation being adapted to technical progress, meaning that a number of test guideline entries in various OHTs have been added or updated based on the updated regulation. And in general, the regulation now refers to published OECD test guidelines when available, without the need for transposition under EU law, so without needing to refer to the so-called EU methods. There are also a number of smaller changes made to specific endpoint study records, as listed here and on the following slide. Many of these are the result of an EFSA working party on FISChem. So, for example, there are small additions made to several physicochemical formats, and as you can see, also some additions to toxicological OHTs. And furthermore, for example, we also see some smaller changes that are relevant to a number of different toxicological or ecotoxicological OHTs. And these are mainly in the form of additions or changes to pick list values. Similarly, smaller changes have been made to a set of endpoint summaries, many of them again resulting from the work of an EFSA working party on FISChem. And these changes are all in the form of additions. Then moving on to the use and exposure templates, where there is a correction in Euclid to conform to the previously agreed specifications. So in the previous major version of Euclid, the professional users document was incorrectly using the contributing scenarios 1 and 2 as listed below, but has now been corrected to use contributing scenarios 2 and 3 instead. So in this respect, the fields for the professional users document have changed. Further on the use and exposure templates, based on the work of the OECD expert group of the working party on exposure assessment, the data structure for reporting monitoring data has been extended in all the use and exposure OHTs. So additions have been made in the sections exposure of the environment, exposure of workers, and exposure of consumers to be able to provide a statistical description of the data set, additional information to understand what the exposure estimates represent, and justification of the data quality and adequacy. Then moving on from the OECD harmonized templates to other Euclid harmonized formats, there are some changes made to a few documents. For example, the EU PPP template transferred via air was moved to the definition provider core to allow its reuse under EU BPR, and an endpoint was added to the document. Some changes were also made to the mixture and substance composition documents, for example, with regard to microbial active substances, nanoforms, and the type of composition. And finally, small changes were also made to the test material and reference substance entities. But thank you very much. That concludes my part. And I will now hand over to our EUCLID product manager, François Le Goff, who will continue on changes to the specific format extensions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leah, for going through the format changes that are relevant to all stakeholders. I'm François Le Goff, and I'm working in the EUCLID product management team. And with you, I will go through changes that are relevant to specific stakeholders now. I will start with an overview of the changes, then I will go in more details to the changes relevant to the classification, labeling, and packaging regulation, including poison centers notifications. I will also show you the changes that are done for the microplastics restrictions reporting requirements. And I will finish my part with some information relevant to EFSA stakeholders. You can see here in these slides the type of changes that were made to specific stakeholders. And I wanted to start with the type of changes that we make to customize EUCLID for a specific regulatory context. These changes start by the working context. You can select a working context when you work with a substance or a mixture dataset or an article dataset. You can also specify some information about the context of your submission in the dossier header. This is what we can customize also, depending on the regulation. Then the table of content that you see on the left side of your screen in EUCLID can be modified. Specific EUCLID documents can be created to record information that is relevant only in a specific process or under a regulation. And we can also implement, in some cases, custom views to the harmonized documents in order to simplify the content and display only the relevant fields in a specific context. In 2025, we have changed several parts of this regulatory context. For ECHA, you can see the relevant regulations here, for EFSA, and also for New Zealand. Let's have a look at the changes that are relevant for the classification, labeling, and packaging, but are also relevant to the poison centers notifications and the classification labeling information submitted under EU REACH registrations, for example. The first changes are coming from an ECHA project that we did last year on the implementation of a report template for harmonized classification and labeling proposals. As part of this project, we identified that there was not a one-to-one mapping between justification for classification and non-classification and the hazard classes that are specified in the regulation. So with this update, we have made sure that there is, at the level of the endpoint summaries, a place to store this justification for classification or non-classification for all the relevant hazard classes. I will also mention some specific changes that were done for repeated dose toxicity. There we have clarified that the field in these endpoint summaries are there to store the justification for classification or non-classification for the hazard class specific target organ toxicity, a repeated exposure, or STOT-RE. Then in the acute toxicity endpoint summary, we have added a justification field to report specifically the justification on the classification for STOT single exposure. You can see a screenshot on the right side of the screen. And finally, for the viscosity endpoint summary, we have added a justification for the hazard class on aspiration hazard. And we have also given the possibility to link to relevant studies stored under another endpoint summary called exposure-related observations in humans. With EUCLID 6 version 9, we now have a complete mapping between the hazard classes and the endpoint summaries to store the justification. So you can see on the right slide, on the right side of the slide, an illustration of this. So each hazard classes mentioned in the CLP regulation and the GHS have now a corresponding endpoint summary where more information about the outcome of the assessment of the hazard class can be stored. I will continue also with changes done to the GHS document. Following the introduction of the new hazard classes already in 2024, we have done some improvements. For example, we have added the possibility to classify a combination of PBT and VPVB, or PMT and VPVM. Before this new version, it was only possible to classify as PBT or VPVB, or as PMT or VPVM. Under the list of specific concentration limits, we have also added the possibility to select endocrine disruptions environmental category 1 and category 2. And these changes are relevant, as I said, for the CNL information, whether it's included in CLP notifications, REACH registrations, or poison centers notifications. Concerning poison centers notifications, I wanted to also point you to the PCN webinar that took place on the 13th of May 2025, that is available on the ECHA website. Finally, some changes done at the level of the PBT and PMT assessment, record and summary. So we have extended now the possibility to record the mobility assessment, the additional part that was included in the CLP revision. So the mobility assessment can now be recorded in the same way as the persistence, bioaccumulation, or toxicity assessment. And we have also extended the criteria for the toxicity assessment according to the latest CLP regulation update. For more information, again, I point you to the latest news we have published on the ECHA website about the revised CLP regulation. Moving now to another topic, this time under EU REACH, where we have created a new working context for fulfilling the reporting requirements under the microplastics restriction. So these reporting requirements are made as part of the microplastic restrictions under EU REACH. And this is relevant for certain uses of synthetic polymer macroparticles subject to a derogation. For these substances, then an estimated annual emissions of SPM to the environment should be submitted to ECHA, and this provision starts from the 31st of May each year, starting in 2026 or 2027, depending on the uses. On this slide, you can see more information about microplastics available on our ECHA website, and I added also the direct link to the reporting requirements document published also on the ECHA website. Now, how does it look like in EUCLID? We have created a new working context available for substances. You can use a generic substance to prepare this type of reportings called synthetic polymer macroparticles. And the reporting requirements are completed under section 2 in the section 3 that is displayed together with this working context. And there you will be asked to identify the uses, the derogation as per the restriction under EU REACH, the use name, product category if relevant, sector of use, and technical function if relevant, manufacturing site for manufacturing uses, then the generic information on the identity of the polymers that you will be able to select from a pick list, and finally the estimated emissions of the SPM. Moving on to yet another topic, and the last one for this part is some highlights of changes relevant to EFSA stakeholders. So together with EFSA, we have implemented changes that are relevant to the regulations they are supporting. First, the EU pesticides active substances. There we have a series of changes. For example, a new document was created to report data on the manufacturing process for the active substance. this document is replacing an existing document. Then you will be able to see that new documents have been created to report study results about the analytical profile of batches. There was also a small update on the way impurities are reported, and also how spectra information is provided. So now the new documents available to report this type of studies are more structured and more consistent with the information requirements. I will mention as well a new document introduced to define the microbial consortium for microbial pesticides dossiers. And then there is also an update of the document containing the letter of access to provide a better structure for this type of information. And you will see a bit later with the presentation from my colleague Dorota that a similar change was done for biocides under ECHA. Finally, for EU pesticides active substance, I will mention the introduction of a new EUCLID working context to prepare submissions for the approval of safeners and synergists in accordance with the regulation you see here on the slide. And I have added an illustration on the right side of the screen to show you how this new working context is displayed in EUCLID. Together with EFSA, we have also implemented a new definition provider and a new working context for food contact materials, for plastic food contact materials more precisely. So this provides now mixture-based working context with a dossier header, where you will be able to store information about the specific submission context. It has also a table of content where you can provide the relevant information. And we have also included 4 specific EUCLID documents for this regulatory context. These documents are used to report migration information for relevant species, to report data on residual content, the intended application of the substance, and finally, there is a document where you can report the identity of all the relevant species, including non-intentionally added substances, so-called NIAS. I have added also a link to the place where on the EFSA website where you can find more information about these changes. Thank you for your attention, and I will now hand over to my colleague Panos to continue the presentation on the changes relevant to specific stakeholders.
Hello, my name is Panos Zarogiannis, and I am ECHA's team leader for the Drinking Water Directive. I am here to give you some details of what the new release of EUCLID means for the processes under the Drinking Water Directive. As a short reminder, under Article 11 of the Drinking Water Directive, and more specifically for the purposes of the European Positive List for starting substances, compositions, and constituents, ECHA manages 2 processes: the notification of intention and the application process. The notification of intention will start at the beginning of 2026, and 1 year later, at the beginning of 2027, the application process will start. This last year has been a year of extensive EUCLID development for the Drinking Water Directive processes. The new EUCLID release incorporates new and improved versions of the working context for, first, the Drinking Water Directive notification of intention, second, the Drinking Water Directive application, and third, an additional working context that will allow applicants to generate and submit data for relevant chemical species and then can be added under Section 1.5 of the application under the Drinking Water Directive. Specifically for the notification of intention process, this is the final release before first submissions take place at the start of 2026. Work on the other 2 working contexts will continue with the aim of making the final release for the Drinking Water Directive application process in the spring of 2026. In the meantime, ECHA has also worked on developing validation rules to support users of this working context in providing the necessary information for their submissions, either notifications of intention or applications, to be successful when submitted to ECHA. You can see on the screen the link to the web page where you may obtain additional information on the validation rules. Additionally, as we are gearing up towards the first notifications of intention in 2026, ECHA has also created the dissemination preview of Drinking Water Directive notifications of intention. The preview will allow notifiers to confirm which parts of the information submitted to ECHA will be published on the ECHAChem website. We would also like to bring to your attention that ECHA is planning testing of the latest released formats for the Drinking Water Directive during spring, summer, and autumn of 2025. As you may be aware, ECHA has set up the DWD IT Tools user group, which brings together stakeholders who are interested in the Drinking Water Directive processes. Members of the group are periodically invited to test the EUCLID formats, the validation rules, the dissemination previews, and other IT tools that ECHA is developing to support the Drinking Water Directive submission processes. Participation in this user group offers a key opportunity to potential notifiers and applicants to get to know EUCLID and other IT tools and develop important knowledge and experience. 2 meetings are being planned for this user group in June, where recent developments for the Drinking Water Directive notification of intention and the application process will be presented. After the meetings, the user group will be asked to undertake some testing of the EUCLID formats and feedback to ECHA with their experiences with any issues identified and any suggestions for improvements. Another benefit of participating in the user group is that its members will be offered the opportunity to make comments and propose improvements to the first EUCLID manual for Drinking Water Directive notifications of intention, which has now been published by ECHA. At the web address you can see on the screen. A separate EUCLID manual for the Drinking Water Directive applications will also be issued in 2026. The DWD IT Tools user group meets periodically online and welcomes new members. Please use the email address shown on the screen if you wish to express your interest in joining the group. With this, I will now pass the floor to my colleague, Dorota Burkhardt-Sosnowska, who will present changes related to the Biocidal Products Regulation. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Panos. My name is Dorota Burkhardt-Sosnowska. I work in Data Management and Analysis Unit in the EUCLID team. I will present changes related to the EUCLID for biocides. First change is the refinement of tables of contents. All the BPR tables of contents, other than BPR Summary of Product Characteristics (SPC), have been simplified by removing the reference sections and keeping only the sections that could host data. Some sections have been renumbered and renamed to keep consistency. Here there is an example of section 6, which in previous version of EUCLID contained a lot of reference subsections marked in italic on the left side of the slide. In EUCLID version 9, this section will have only 2 subsections in which you can insert data. How to know which sections corresponds to the requirements listed in Annex 2 or Annex 3 of the Biocidal Products Regulation? The supporting documentation in form of the mapping tables has been prepared and will be published in annexes to the Biocidal Submission Manual Technical Guide. The link is given in the orange text box. When simplifying the table of contents, we also paid attention to ensure that names of sections better reflect their content. For example, as the trade names should be reported in the section 2.3, we added the phrase proposed trade names to the name of this section. I highlighted it in orange on the slide. We also harmonized names of documents used in the Biocidal Product Authorization dataset and in the SPC dataset wherever it was possible. For example, the names of documents describing family, meta-SPC, and products are now the same in both tables of content. We added to Biocides table of contents certain documents being in use by other legislation. For substances, those are fate and behavior in air, other distribution data, and definition of the residue. The numbering on the slide is taken from the active substance table of contents. For products, we added document related to endocrine disruption in section 9.3. Additionally, BPR active substance application representative product table of contents received a new document which lists all representative products other than the one reported in the main table of contents. This is needed when for one active substance application there is more than one representative product. Now, all those products will be displayed with their own datasets accessible in subtrees. We created two new tables of contents to report data on microbial products required by the Annex 3, Title 2 of the Biocidal Products Regulation. Those tables of contents are BPR microorganisms, active substance application representative product, and BPR microorganism biocidal product authorization. Dossiers for the microbial products created in the previous version of Euclid will remain in the tables of contents used for the chemical products. There is no obligation to update this dossier. However, whenever a new dossier is prepared, the recommendation is to use the table of contents dedicated to the microorganisms. The supporting documentation in form of the mapping between Euclid sections and BPR Annex 3 Title 2 has been prepared and will be published in the Annex 9 to the Biocide Submission Manual Technical Guide. The link is given in the orange text on the slide. Annex 4 to the same manual still contain the list of Euclid sections used to report data relevant to microorganism products in Euclid version 8 and earlier for your convenience. Both new tables of contents contain one new document, Biocidal properties of the microorganism in the biocidal product. Fields added to this document relevant to a microbial product have been hidden in the document used for the microbial substance. In the dossier header for a BPR active substance application representative product, you can now indicate one more purpose of application, the inclusion of the active substance in Annex 1. You should then specify the relevant category, for example, Category 1 for substances authorized as food additives. Let's look now at other documents. In the summary of product composition, which has been renamed to Family or Meta-SPC, we hide checkboxes not relevant for biocides components. We also harmonize labels describing concentration with the labels used in the summary of product characteristics. So now we have in both documents the same phrase, content range. And finally, we added a component flag. The flag, which is called Use Restricted to Selected Regulatory Programs, is needed to exclude a component when reusing a biocidal product authorization dataset to prepare an SPC for families. The detailed instruction on how to do that, also for the composition of a single product, is available in the Annex 5 to the Biocide Submission Manual Technical Guide. The link is given in the orange text box on the slide. In the product document, we did a similar change regarding the labels. They are now harmonized, so we have content and content range. Then we harmonized the way of reporting content of different components in an SPC and in the product authorization. For any component other than generated in situ, only content can be provided. For an active substance component generated in situ, only content range can be provided. For components generated in situ other than an active substance, content or content range can be provided. But not both for the same component. It means that if the content field is provided, the field content range is disabled, and vice versa. If the content range is filled in, the field content is disabled. we simplified the way in which the manufacturer of an active substance and the manufacturer of the product is reported. Here on slide, I show the example of the product, but this is the same change for all the substances and for an SPC. In the Euclid version 9, we use only one document, product manufacturer and sites, or active substance manufacturer and sites, to report a manufacturing site and associated manufacturer. For each reported site, a manufacturer must be provided. There is no need to create a recording section representative product manufacturer and site if a representative product manufacturer and site have not yet been identified. The data on manufacturer provided in the obsolete document Biocidal product manufacturer or active substance manufacturer, which have been used in the previous versions of Euclid, has been migrated and kept in the dossiers in Euclid version 9. The document is marked as obsolete, and the new data cannot be inserted in this document in a dataset. We added the possibility to indicate that the active substance is efficacious in combination with other substances. This is done in section 6.1 in the document Function, Mode of Action, Target Organism, Resistant and Summary, in the field Mode of Action. Then, in the document Use in the Substances table of content, we hide the reference field, which are not required for a substance and are not part of the substance table of contents. Those fields contained link to packaging, application methods, and use-specific directions for use. And finally, in all the documents in which we provide a list of predefined end sentences to describe risk mitigation measures, we differentiated labels, so it is clear now which field contains the predefined phrases and where is the place for the free text. And the last change relevant to biocides is an improvement in the document Summary and Evaluation, relevant both to substances and mixtures products. Letters of access and permissions to refer can be attached in the repeatable table with possibility of cross-reference to all relevant documents used in the table of contents. There is also possibility to identify what is the type of attached document. For example, it can be a letter of access for the entire active substance linked to the product dataset. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention, and I hand the floor back to Robin Allen.
Thank you, Dorota. I will now continue with some other changes for the release of Euclid 6 version 9. Firstly, we have an improvement in the way that tables are edited in the Euclid interface. In the previous version of Euclid, clicking in a row opens a window to the right, from which all values in the row are edited. This has the drawbacks that data are shown out of context of the table, and some data in the rows are partly hidden. In the new functionality, each field is edited individually in its own box below the row. The data are shown in the context of the table, and the data in the other rows are visible whilst editing. Also, the new layout requires fewer mouse clicks. Next, we have an improvement to the interface, which was suggested by the team at ECHA who are responsible for the validation assistant. It is an example of how feedback from users can be applied to make the registration process at ECHA more efficient for all concerned. Where Other is selected in a drop-down menu, there are two subfields, which are a statement of the other value and a separate remark on that statement. On the left of this slide, you can see what is shown in the old version of Euclid. On the right is the new version, where the subfields have been made clearer by separating them under their own headers and by improving the placeholder text. The next slide shows changes to what is offered by the report generator. Firstly, for the CSR report, the output format of docx has been added. Secondly, the report for GHS in output format docx has been improved, and justifications for non-classification have been added in an annex. Finally, a new type of report on CLH has been added. This is the first report for CLH. When you go looking for these changes, remember that the types of reports shown in the interface depend on the working context currently selected. We have made some changes to the software support provided for local installations of Euclid. This was done to concentrate our resources where they are needed most. Firstly, the macOS is no longer supported for local installations of Euclid. Users of the macOS can still log in to remotely access instances of Euclid 6. For more details, see FAQ 138 on the Euclid website. The second point applies only to systems administrators for Euclid 6 server. We no longer support the database of type external Derby. We recommend changing to the free software PostgreSQL, for which we provide support. For more details, see FAQ 139 on the Euclid website. That ends the content of the webinar. Now for a short recap. The new release, Euclid 6 version 9, is available to download from the Euclid website at the address below. It includes format changes, which are applied automatically during the upgrade, fixes and improvements to the functionality. For more details, check the release notes on our website at the address below. Don't forget that during this webinar, up until 3 p.m. Helsinki time, we have a live Q&A session, which is your chance to ask the experts about the release. You can keep your questions anonymous. If you have any queries about your own data or registrations, please contact the help desk directly. The Q&As will be published on the webinar pages soon at the address below. Thank you for your participation.